So we are blessed with a very informed and articulate panel tonight, and they're very happy to answer your questions. But we'll start, I think, by asking them to tell us a little bit about their experience of this process that was tasked to the convention, the Referendum Council.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Andrew. They've passed me the mic first, so I'll remember that when the questions come through. Andrew's introduced all of us, but I think I'll start by acknowledging as well that we meet on the lands of the Kaurna people today, and I thank Aunty Margaret for a very kind welcome. I think it is something for us to reflect on. The warm and very kind welcomes that we often receive to be on each other's country isn't something that we should fault or forget. It is a very, very important practice. So, I am a Warra-Gugutha man, so my mum's family are all from the far west coast of South Australia, and I've got some aunties here, so I think it is very respectful of me to acknowledge them as well. And my nana was born in a little place called Fowler's Bay over on the far west coast. But kind of bringing it forward and in response to Andrew's question, I was quite fortunate, and I'm happy to share, but I think at the age of 21, Auntie Cheryl Axelby and Uncle Clinton Wanganeen, who led the dialogue in Adelaide, asked if I would come along and speak about the race power. And at that stage, I was a young law student, and I think I don't need to go into it in any great detail, but I think those in the room would have a fair understanding of the play out of Hindmarsh Island in our state and how that was heavily politicised. And, the likes of Nana Dodo, Katineri and others who fought a strong and hard campaign to have their native title rights recognised. So as a young 21-year-old, I thought, I've got my work cut out for me. So I went along reluctantly, and Dwayne and Melissa will remember, and I kind of asked who in the audience has read the Constitution, and everyone put their hand up, and I said, well, who knows the race power? Again, everyone put their hand up, which made my job even harder, I think, because, I thought most of my time would be spent talking about the race power and what it is, so I had to quickly pivot and thought, which led to a very interesting discussion. And, I think it kind of contextualises, what the regional dialogues were for me in the sense that our people were very, very versed in what we were there to discuss. This wasn't something new. It is something that has been on the table for quite a long time. And albeit being the facilitator, I learnt a lot in that, from that context, and it's really important to recognise the dialogues because, just reflecting on the South Australia one alone, there was, a vast representation of Aboriginal people from across the state, from Aboriginal community-controlled organisations to our peak bodies, to community reps, to native title owners, and someone else can probably correct me a bit later, but my understanding is that it was the most, the greatest proportion of Aboriginal people we've had that have come together and have agreed on a consensus matter. So I think that puts to bed some of the issues that we have around, disagreements within our own communities, and we can talk through that. But, the 13 dialogues is the roadmap that that led to the culmination of the National Constitutional Convention, having that the scale of Aboriginal representation and Torres Strait Islanders, from across the country come together in what was the National Constitutional Convention was something like we haven't seen before. The scale was incredible. I remember being there, and we all flew in, and never, ever, ever, and I've grown up in the days of the Land Rights Act when the Northern Territory Land Council and the Central Land Council were beasts to be reckoned with. The Parliament didn't swing against them. They were really strong entities of Aboriginal people advancing land rights even before native title had come to be. So, you know, it was a sight that I think not even other Aboriginal people in the room had experienced before, being in a room with, you know, thousands of years of knowledge that had, you know, led to this point and moment where we had discussed it, you know, from the Uluru Statement to many others, you know, that have, you know, Kirribilli and others that have come in this journey. You know, on a personal level, I find myself really, really fortunate. I think I look at my cousins and others, and you know that opportunity is very rare, and we will not see it. And I hope that we, you know, pending the upcoming referendum, you know, the way in which we come together to meet, connect, discuss. Isn't something new. We've done it for thousands of years, but I think we really have to acknowledge the sheer volume of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that have come together to say, this is our invitation to the rest of Australia.
Thank you, Arrin. Thank you. And that's one of the criticisms, isn't it? That, you know, not everyone was consulted. My goodness, it was an incredibly wide consultative process. And would one of you like to talk about perhaps the structure of the dialogues? My understanding is they were well and truly isolated from each other, so it wasn't like a Me Too movement bouncing from one dialogue to the next. Each group were posed the same questions and went through similar processes. But Melissa, are you able to tell us about that?
Yes, and my name is Melissa Clarke, and thank you very much for the introduction, Andrew, and thank you very much for the welcome to country. I'm firstborn daughter to Louis Lovegrove, very proud Ngarrindjeri woman, and very rich and powerful ancestors from Widugu and Ghana as well. So in, it was 2017, I was the Director of Aboriginal Services at Aboriginal Legal Rights Movement. Cheryl Axelby was the CEO, very proud Narungga woman. And the referendum council had been tasked with going out to consult with Aboriginal people on constitutional recognition and what it means to them. So you may remember the Recognise campaign. And I think, you know, from an Adelaide perspective, we had, I think, Tanya Hosh and Adam Goods were kind of the face of that. We had Recognise and Reconciliation SA were heavy backers of that. And, you know, there was grumblings in community. It's like, oh, we don't want anything sort of tokenistic and symbolic. And the government heard that, and so it was a Liberal government, and they tasked the Referendum Council, who was co-chaired by Arnie Pat Anderson, and what's that, Liebelt, that white lawyer fella there. That's it, Mark Liebler. And Megan Davis and Noel Pearson were also on the council. So they didn't select who was going to the dialogues. What they did was they went to some of what would be the major representative bodies of Aboriginal communities in each jurisdiction, and for a lot of jurisdiction that was land councils. In South Australia, that was the Aboriginal Legal Rights Movement. So, as Arrin said, it was Cheryl Axelby, who was the CEO at the time, and Uncle Candy, and I think that he might have been the chair or CEO or something of Narungga Aboriginal Corporation. And they were told by the Referendum Council to just go out and pull together, you know, a couple of hundred people. But there was a formula. Like, we really wanted to ensure that elders were involved, that women, you know, men, young people. So they came up with this thing where it was like 60%, of those sort of community-based traditional owners through the land councils, native title, that sort of stuff, community leaders. I think it was 20% Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, making sure that members of the stolen generation were captured in that. And then 20% of Aboriginal people that were considered, had expertise and influence. They were really clear to not invite politicians or, very senior bureaucrats because they had a voice. And they were tasked to understand what constitutional recognition meant to us. So, as a part of Aboriginal Legal Rights Movement, if you're not aware, is a community-controlled organisation that has a Aboriginal board that is elected by its Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander membership. It's now, you have to sign up for membership, but back then it was representative of every single Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person over the age of 16 in South Australia. From my perspective, it was very community-led in terms of how it was delivered here. We then had the 3-day dialogue. In my role, the board were involved in the decision-making. Was asked to be a working group leader to facilitate one of the 5 workshops that were happening. Huge responsibility, pretty amazing. But I tell you what, I remember sitting in the room and I had all these ideas and about what I thought representation looked like, what I thought participation looked like, what I thought, agreement making, sovereignty, justice looked like. And to be in a room with all these amazing people from across, this state, we all kind of had, I felt really validated, right? I was like, oh yeah, I'm not just making it up in my own head. Really proved that those yarns and the way we view each other and the world as blackfellas and what the solutions are moving forward was all pretty agreeable, So I felt really powerful in that space. And then the Adelaide dialogue, those that attended, there was an election process on who was going to represent the Adelaide dialogue at Uluru. And given our expertise in terms of working group leaders, we were also invited to Uluru. And 3-day process again, there was a record of statement from every dialogue that came out. And the Referendum Council and the team, they had IATSIS were there. Who else was there? So there was full support in the actual process everywhere, but they would analyse the record of the meeting afterwards, and they'd start synthesising what it is, what's eventually going to come out, and no one really knew. In South Australia, we were very, very, very clear that we did not want symbolic recognition. We were very clear that we needed to have a voice at the highest level. We didn't actually know what that looked like, but I remember that being super clear. I remember when we finally landed on the last day of Uluru and the Referendum Council team, they were working around the clock on these dialogues. It was just ridiculous. And when they had pulled together this beautiful petition to the Australian people, being the Uluru Statement from the Heart, Voice, Treaty, Truth, when Megan Davis got up and read that out, there wasn't just that was good. We stood up, we cheered, we cried, we hugged. It was one of the most incredible, amazing experiences. And I tell you what, you hear about fellas walking out of the yarns there in Uluru. Yeah, it did happen. It was, a few people, maybe, I don't know, a dozen. But I've been really lucky to still be in contact with some of those people, and, not to say that they're not staunch in whatever they felt at the time, but they kind of wish the people that I've spoken to kind of wish they'd done it a little bit differently. when non-Aboriginal Australia say that, well, Aboriginal people can't agree on this, guess what? We get to have democratic rights as well, and we get to disagree, and we get to come to a consensus as well. So, yeah.
Oh, Mel, thank you so much.
Could I just add to that, Andrew? Because I think Mel's given a really well-rounded overview of the dialogues, and I just wanted to share and ask you, to remember this. In the lead up to the dialogues, we've had close to almost 15 years of bipartisan support on the concept of recognition. So, and in South Australia, not to difference ourselves from other jurisdictions, but this is something that, that has been on the table up for discussion for a very long time. So, if we wind forward, that's 15 years of both sides of government saying we are ready to recognise you. So, the question really that was, yes, we had breakout groups and there was a lot of discussion around everything that Mel has captured, but, similar to the Recognise campaign and all of those campaigns that have come before that, the question, that stands strong to my mind is, well, what is recognition? And as Mel said, the very strong voice that had come out not only within the Adelaide dialogue but was echoed around the country is that simple recognition in the Constitution is just not going to cut it. And what was crafted and sculpted out of the dialogues and the National Convention was the Uluru Statement, which I think was, a pretty fair, generous compromise in the scheme of things.
And here's the referendum question, and I'm putting it up there so that we can ask our panel. Perhaps Dale and Dwayne would like to have a look at this, but read it carefully. A simple question: to alter the Constitution to recognise the first people of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve, yes or no?
Firstly, thank you, Auntie Margaret, for that welcome to country. Very important as a local. Grew up here in Port Adelaide. It's very important, Yaratapulti, to acknowledge this place. Very important to the Kaurna people. But I guess, one of the things, that's common when it comes to referendums is if you don't know, vote no. But as you can see, with the guiding principles that Andrew displayed up here, is that there's a whole nother process that comes after this. So we need to believe in that process and know that, at the end of the day when we vote, what we want people to do is be fully informed, have all the knowledge, have all the information at hand, but also to know that this isn't just a one and done. I'll vote and this will happen and it'll kind of be, all well and good. It's no, I'm voting to be invested in the future and I'm going to continue to, I guess, be involved in the process. There was no way for me, as somebody who's, a young fella, been, around some magnificent elders, I would not want them to go and put their heart and soul into a model, into a proposal that was later rejected. No way would I put my people through that, to go through this whole process of, yes, we're going to decide that this is what we want, and then it gets rejected. No, we have to. We have to simply make this a part of how we do business. So, for me, the Uluru Statement, being one of the people that, alongside Mel and Arrin, been involved from that day, from the Uluru Statement, from the Adelaide Regional Dialogue. But, I've been fortunate enough to have conversations with mob all around the country. Back in 2015, talking about recognition in people's lives. Just yarning, just talking, just having that, opportunity to, I don't care what, at the end of the day, it's like you give the opportunity for people to have their say. And then you discuss from there how we create common ground, how we create our sense of shared future, because it is our future together. But it has to be done, we have to commit to a better future. And especially when you think about the fact that when the Constitution came about in the 1900s, 1901, they had all these conventions all around the country. Not one Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person was involved. Back then they were talking about Aboriginal people as a dying race, to be forgotten in history. Well, guess what? We're here. We're not going away. And the fact is, the statement was a gift to the Australian people because we knew politicians play games. Politicians play games with our lives, and it cannot continue. So that's why it was decided that actually, no, this needs to go back to the people. And you do have to acknowledge the fact that there are people who are vocal in their opposition and ask the hard questions like, whose authority do you have? But at the end of the day, we have to get back to the reality of what's happening on the ground, and the idea that the Crown has a power that it can use in section 51(26) of the Australian Constitution that can make special laws in regards to race. That power has only been used for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. How can that be? How can we say that's okay in 2023? It's simply not on. So, you know, I feel quite happy but also sad the fact that I know a lot more about the Australian Constitution than most people. But it's not my document. It was never built for me. But our people have created a space. We've created space for our people. And not isolationist either, but we're talking about a collective. Because we know there's not us and them, it's we, it's us. That's the power we have. And I want people to really go, you know, enjoy the beautiful scenery of these beautiful videos and stuff, but read the report. Read the report. Read the many different statements out there. I'm sick of the statements. I'm sick of the statements. I said when the Uluru Statement came out, let that be the last statement we ever make. Because it's simply just not on. But it's oh, we've got a question here, Andrew. Go on. No, I really believe strong-heartedly in the fact that, you know, Yirrkala Bark petition, you know, Barunga Statement, Kirribilli Statement, statement, talk, yet where is the action? So that's why we saw this opportunity, and we got growled. We got told off at that meeting they had here in Adelaide by a very prominent Aboriginal leader who said quite clearly to us, growled us, stood up, said, I'm sick of this, I'm sick of talking, I'm sick of having these conversations, now's the time to do something about it. What are we going to do? Or are we just going to sit here and wallow? No. And they said this was the last meeting they will attend. And I think it is. That was the final nail in terms of, you know what? The line in the sand is drawn. Uluru Statement has to be fulfilled. We have to stay true to Uluru. We have to make sure the mandate for a First Nations voice is enshrined in the Constitution. Nothing that can be swept away and just brushed under the carpet, but is there in concrete, in stone. The rights of our people to have their voices heard on the matters that affect them and their lives. Because what we heard from the Adelaide dialogue was a sense of urgency. People said, we can't let this continue. It's got to stop. It's got to end. So this is where we saw the vision of, let's put it to the people. We can't play politics anymore. Politicians will be the death of us.